Good? Okay. We have no public comment tonight, so we will be moving forward with the rest of the meeting. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Again, this month, before we look for that motion, I would like to take the personnel report out of the consent agenda.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of the personnel report.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda without the personnel report.
I'll second.
Mr. Shaneberg?
Aye.
Ms. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Blount?
Aye.
Mr. Cronin?
Aye.
Mr. Sartorius?
Aye.
Mr. Skorzynski?
Aye.
Mrs. Conquest?
Aye, motion carries. Now I need a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
I would like to make that motion that we approve the personnel report as presented. Again, the reasons I always state is that I think it's important when we hire people in our district, we're hiring the best that we can find, and I think everyone should know who these quality people are. So that's why we do it. So I make that motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Skorzynski?
Aye.
Mr. Sartorius?
Aye.
Mr. Blount?
Aye.
Mr. Cronin?
Aye.
Mr. Shaneberg?
Aye.
Ms. Voss?
Aye.
Mrs. Conquest?
Aye, motion carries.
All right, this month, moving back in our strategic plan updates, we have gone through from strategic goal 5 all the way up through 2. And so this month we are going back to goal 5, which is pretty much going to be a finance and operations update and projection. We normally would do a update on goal 1 and some of the academic data as well, but our map window just closed last Friday, so we are still collecting data and summarizing, so we'll be preparing that for the February meeting. But for goal 5, we have Director of Finance and Operations, Mary Robinson.
Yeah? No? Here I am. Okay. So yes, goal 5, we'll get right into it. Goal 5 is to ensure community trust through effective and efficient operations and stewardship of facility and financial resources. So tonight we are going to review the current year's budget, look at some projections, and then look at some projects that we have coming up. So first, I'll start out with a financial update. Just to review, we break down our funds, operating funds and non-operating. So I just put this in here as reference, so if we're ever talking by number, the board can reference which fund we're speaking of. Our operating funds, we ideally have balanced funds, what we receive each year and what we spend each year balances. And then non-operating funds might not always balance out depending on the debt schedule or certain projects we have. That's why sometimes we look at just if the operating funds are balancing each year. And then a little bit more review, our revenue sources. So you can see here the piece of the pie, the biggest pieces are our property taxes and our other local. So the property taxes are definitely the local or the biggest piece of our budget. And then included in that other local is our TIF surplus and then student fees and lunch fees. And then the state revenue, and that's our evidence-based funding. This year we're just under $15 million in evidence-based funding. And then that also includes our special ed and transportation reimbursement and our Preschool for All grant. And then our federal revenue, which includes our title grants, our special education grant, and then this year it also includes some emergency relief funds that we are still receiving.
So does this percentage stay the same pretty much every year, or does
it stays really similar. Yeah, it varies a little bit. Recently, our federal was increased because of the emergency relief and the additional lunch support that we received federally. So the federal amount was, which obviously skews all the other numbers, but it's right around these numbers, yeah, every year.
I would say the evidence-based funding has ticked upwards slowly over the past 6 years, but not big jumps. We're talking 1% maybe.
Okay, so where we're at as of basically today, our revenue, we've received 68.5% of our operating fund revenue. So this is actually pretty normal. We've already received all of the tax revenue from our 2021 levy, and we've already received our Shanahan TIF surplus money. We received that in January. So to be, even though we're halfway through the year, to be above halfway, that's pretty normal at this point. The only thing that really pops out is that capital projects, we have that lower percent, and that's because we received that in the spring. The builder's fees come in from Shanahan and Shorewood and Minooka mostly in the spring. So we're right on target pretty much. The major sorry. Can I go back? Yeah, got it, okay. The major variances that I wanted to point out, so our TIF surplus is actually up. Our Shanahan, the Oxable TIF, we're receiving 1.3 million more than budgeted. This is because the Village of Shanahan has been working on a TIF extension, and while they were working through that process, the TIF was extended for an additional year. But during that year, the supplemental agreement that handled how the surplus was shared was not extended. So the district received the full amount of the taxes this year. So that's added quite a bit to our budget this year. And then all of the other difference that are referenced, there's some plus and minuses. They're smaller. So overall, our revenues are expected to come in right around $1 million over budgeted. Mm-hmm.
So the 1.3 million, though, when we talked about this back in the fall, did you know that at that time?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know that. We found out, maybe a month or two ago in our meetings that's what, I knew we had been discussing it, but I didn't know where it would land, so.
There's discussions about extending the TIF with a new development agreement that would mimic the revenues that we're seeing here. And we were expecting that in future budget years, but the fact that there was a loophole that allowed the financial formula, I guess, to trigger this type of surplus this year, we weren't expecting when we adopted the budget.
It's good.
And can you just quickly give like a quick sentence about what TIF surplus means? I think that's confusing to people, when they hear about this, like what that means for that we expected and how we obtain that, that money.
Right. So the TIF agreement was developed 23 years ago. Is it 22?
Let's back up.
Okay.
Tax Increment Financing District is what we're referring to. TIF is the acronym there. So.
Okay. So 22 years ago it was established. The main, it's Oxable is the main source of this TIF. It's really the only thing in this TIF district. So
Oxable liquid products, not our elementary school.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, not our school. So the taxes that are paid in by Oxable liquid products, then there's an agreement of how those taxes are shared. So Oxable can receive some of the taxes back based on projects that they have done, and then the taxing bodies will receive the other portion. So the old agreement had a kind of a complicated breakdown of that sharing of the taxes. There was different pieces, but when you really looked at it, it was about a 75%, 25%. So we were receiving about 75% of the taxes paid in. And that's where this year we received 100% of the taxes, and that was where the 1.3 million came from. Am I not clicking anymore? Okay. And then on the revenue, on the expenditure side, and again, this is typical that in schools, salaries and benefits do make up the majority of our expenditures. So you can see here this year, 80% is based on salary and benefits. And then where we're at this year, like I said before, we're a little bit over halfway through the year, so this 52.5% is where we're at. That's actually a little bit low. I expect at this point in the year to be a little higher. We have paid out just over half of our payrolls, but there's also a lot of expenses at the beginning of the year larger purchases, our insurance premiums, things of that sort that I would expect to be a little bit higher at this point. So our expenditures are running slightly low. The major variance that I see is that we have some vacant staff positions. So again, based on if there's vacancies in the staff, then that's salaries account, but then also those benefit accounts that go with the salary. So we see that across all funds of 10, 20, and 40 that we're seeing. That would be, we have vacancies in our custodians, our cooks, our classroom aides, and bus drivers, obviously. And so overall, our expenditures, I'm thinking we'll be about $450,000 under budget.
So how many open positions do we have?
And I think Sarah's going to talk more about that. She, I think, has the specifics.
I thought so, I just wanted to bring it up.
Okay. So we'll get to that, yeah. And then basically, so with the surplus, here are just some recommendations. So Dr. Cheserek will talk about an additional curriculum purchase. And then we're recommending some new maintenance equipment that could be purchased out of this year's budget, and Glenn will talk about that shortly. Lease payments, this is more of a timing thing. I can go ahead and pay some of our technology and transportation lease payments in this budget year, and then that frees up, we have some freedom for next budget year. And then we also are just starting talks with Aaron in technology and our transportation department on improving our bus camera system. And then any remaining surplus would just be added to our fund balance.
So how much, like at that, how much are you talking about then?
For which piece of it?
Just all of it. What-
Yeah, so I think our curriculum purchase right now, we're looking at around $150,000. The new maintenance equipment, about $100,000. Lease payments is where I can really, just depending on how much I have, because we have several transportation and technology leases. And then the bus camera system, that could be a couple $100,000 also, but
So pretty much you go through the whole.
I could. And then moving on to some financial projections. So I like to start each year with just doing a base scenario. So the base scenario will just have all the information that we either know will definitely happen or we can reasonably assume. And then with no other major changes. So for this base scenario, we have our federal revenue. Like I said, we still have some emergency relief coming in this year, but we know that will end. So I've gone ahead and taken that out in future years. But then I've left all of our other federal grants flat. Our state revenues I've held flat for this scenario. And then our local revenue I've increased based on the projected levy and then using 5% increase in EAV in additional years. And then the TIF surplus that we talked about, what we received this year will become our new normal based on the agreement that we are looking at getting into. So that has been increased for the scenario. And then this is just a little bit of history to show how that 8% and then the 5 moving forward is a pretty reasonable and actually even conservative estimate based on the growth in our area and what we've seen historically in the last few years. And then on the expenditure side for the base scenario, what we do know is the agreements that we have in place, so the MEA and then the support agreement, the years that our budget or are agreed upon, I've included those into the scenario. For all other years, I've gone ahead and just used 3%. And then I've increased our health insurance because we know that typically happens each year, and our special education tuition by 5%. So all other expenditures are held flat. All other class sizes, so meaning staffing, everything else in this scenario is held flat. And with that, this chart shows basically the last 5 years, and then the peak is the current year, and then the future. So you can see over the past 5 years, we've increased, I'm sorry, I should back up. The line is basically our fund balance. It is our fund balance. So that's what you're looking at, the line. We've grown fund balance over the last 5 years, slowly has gone up. And then where we hit the peak is this year because we've issued the bonds for the junior high project and we're not spending them in this year. So that's why we are seeing the peak this year. And then the next chart is just really the peak moving forward. So it's just kind of a zoomed in view. So then you'll see moving next the next 5 years, again, with what we know, we're pretty much balanced. We're pretty much just the straight line. The numbers are varying slightly, but it's pretty much a straight line across. So I like to go ahead and do another scenario just to show the board, going back to our evidence-based funding. So that's our state funding, and in the past few years, we still are a Tier 1 district, so we expect that we will receive new money each year. I've gone ahead and just listed what we've received in the past to show that I used $500,000 as an estimate for the next 3 years, and I think, again, that's a conservative estimate based on what we have received. And then I dropped us to $250 just in case we do drop down to that Tier 2. I just wanted to keep the estimate reasonable. And so if we look at this scenario, which I've just called 2, Aaron, I can't click. So we can start to see that the dip again is just next year after we're spending out the junior high project, but then we can see that the line now is starting to slightly increase. Looking at it, it looks like a slight increase, but I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into the numbers, just because I know that the chart looks slight, but if we really look at it, the way that evidence-based funding works is once you receive it 1 year, then that becomes your new base minimum. So if we receive $500,000 next year, then year 2, we would receive that 500 and another 500. So it continues to grow. So if we continue to receive this evidence-based funding as expected, the scenario 2 column would really be what we would be looking at as a budget surplus each year. Those would be the funds available for the board to decide whether they would like to spend.
So when you said it continues to grow, is it doubled every time?
Well, I'm just using $500,000 as an estimate, but yeah, if we receive $500,000 in new money this year, then because we're around 15 million now, so then that 15.5 becomes our base, and then if the next year we receive 500, then the new base is 16 million.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just continuing to grow. And then just one other quick way to look at it. This is actually the same data as the other graph with the line, but you can see here when I pull it out just how much it continues to grow. So based on those budget surpluses that we have each year, if the board were to say, you know, no, we're just going to hold things flat and not spend any of them, you could see the growth. It really does add up to, by FY28, we're looking at over $6 million. So just another way to look at that chart, just kind of zooming in on the numbers a little bit. So that is all I had on the finance end. Did you have some questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question about the assumptions on the base scenario for expenditures.
Okay.
So, or to understand it, the assumption is all positions full, right?
Yes.
That's not where we're at now. That the assumption is if all current vacancies were filled.
Right. So I didn't take anything. I didn't adjust this year's. I worked off of this year's budget, not this year's actuals.
Okay.
So this year's budget assumes that everything was filled.
Gotcha. And secondly, for the special education tuition, it's a 5% increase each year. Is that something you've standardly used? I know it jumped significantly, whether it was this year or into this year. So is that the number that we're comfortable with?
I've used 5, just knowing that, you know, all their costs are going to increase also. This year that would not have been near enough to cover, and so that's why we make some like adjustments obviously when we get actuals, but I've always used 5 in assumptions.
Okay, thank you.
Remind us what year our long-term debt current
Ends,
drops. Yes.
2029.
Okay, so the year after was
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yeah, but again, the charts are only operating funds, so that doesn't include that debt, but yes.
Ms. Robinson, were there any contingencies built into the model? Because our budget contains contingency.
The model contains the same contingencies as this year.
Yeah, so in addition to the surplus that the evidence-based funding increases would give us, we do have some natural contingencies built into the budget of the operating funds. So
Yes.
there should be available funds if the board wanted to consider a few programmatic modifications, increases, purchases, something like that. So this presentation was to give you a foundation as we start to prepare next year's budget and talk about what improvements we can make.
Now I'm going to call up Mr.
Well,
Weiss.
I have one more quick
sorry.
one. So, any wrenches, I mean, like, would a recession hurt? Would,
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, like if, we're not projecting that, but yes, like that would be a major change and we would have to come back and,
have you run any numbers, any models off of that, just in case?
I have not, I could,
Just
yeah,
curious to see what it would,
yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's obvious in here is that when she says all other expenses are going to be held flat, we all see what inflation has done over the past, 2 years now. So, the basic supplies that we're purchasing are going to cost more. So contingency can help with that. Our EAVs have generally been more than 5%. So there's some natural safeties built into this projection as well.
Yes, going either way. Are we good? All right, operations. All right, Mr. Weissong, I'm going to hand it over. And just click that. Go to the right.
Good evening, everybody. Let's go over a few of the projects that, one, I inherited, and a couple of new projects that we're going to be doing for the next summer here. The ADA entrance at the district's office is pretty much getting close to being wrapped up. As you can see, the doors were put in at both ends. On the lower door, door 11, we just have the handicap operators that have to be, buttons have to be put in. The wrong buttons were ordered. They're in. Now it's a matter of scheduling the electrician to come out and finish that wiring, which is about a couple hours worth of work. The lift project is pretty much complete. They scheduled an inspection. I'm not sure on that. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks for the inspector to get out here. And once he's done with that and certifies it, we'll put this in operation. We can start using it. The next one is I came on board here. I went over to the junior high and we saw that we had several classroom doors that we had complaints that they were broke. As you can see in the picture there, there's a horizontal crack in that door, which pretty much the door is ruined. It ruins its fire rating and everything. So working with STR, our architects, I worked with them. We were able to use our life safety funds to replace these 7 doors. This will happen approximately at spring break. The contractor already has the doors in place and he has to put everything together.
so does that include installation too, or is it just
Yeah.
the doors? Okay.
Installation, everything, doors. What they have to do, they're UL installers, so they have to record when they cut in a section of a fire-rated door, so it takes a little bit of time. And it's all the hardware included as well. The next item here, this is probably the biggest project we got going on next summer. It's the HVAC replacement project for the 4 fingers and some outlining rooms of all the univents. In addition to that, there will be new ceilings and lighting system, as well as upgrades to the antiquated building automation system controls, which controls this. Now that's only for part of the building. My next slide kind of slides in with this as well. And in addition to that, what I was talking to Mary about, as long as we're in this facility, if we could try to finish changing out the remainder of the building controls for that building, because they're antiquated and a lot of the parts aren't available. And with these funds, try to complete the junior high as well as start the intermediate school as well. Looking into a new sign, electronic sign of the junior high. I'll be working with the principals and some vendors regarding design and cost. This is planned to happen sometime this summer coming up. Parking lots and paving, within the next couple of months, I'll be working on putting a bid packet together for some repairs that fall in line with this budget we have set here for place. This is pretty much what they've been spending for the last couple of years here. I have to run around and with my assistant and look at some of the areas and mark them out, and then we'll put a bid packet together for you guys to approve. Last but not least, minor projects. I plan on meeting with all the principals in February to discuss any needs that are going on in the facilities. We're going to continue to make improvements to the south building, south maintenance building. What we've started is we've started cleaning and organizing it. We'd like to eventually use it as a work area for the maintenance crew and the grounds crew, as well as all the storage for all the equipment that we have. and keep it in place and locked up. And eventually, probably move the entire B&G department over there to work together. Equipment, we're looking at purchasing a new piece of a tractor to help with the acreage that we have here, and our, to help our staff. We're kind of a little low on that end. This piece of equipment will help them be a little bit more efficient in cutting the grass and things like that. The truck is another piece of equipment we're going to continually add to our equipment for snow plowing in the future when we take over. Our plan is to gradually take over more schools every year until we completely take over and we have all our equipment we need. Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. I know it wasn't one of the slides. I was wondering if we could get a quick update on the MES HVAC project from this past summer. Specifically, how near it is to completion, and if this was, I know you jumped in late to this project, you're in the middle, so I know that while I'm asking the question, but since we're using PSI again for the junior high and very similar contractors and companies, how's that going, and is it on schedule, or is it running late, I guess is my question.
Again, I came in and pretty much in the middle of it, and I think with a period of time where there was nobody involved, maybe some things might have gotten a little convoluted, but they're about 70 to 80% done with the control section of it, with programming it. We've been addressing consistently any punch list items that have been coming up with the equipment. The generator was set about a week ago. That's going to get completed, I think it's President's Day in February. They have to do a power shutdown in order to tie everything in. So that's ready to go, and the controls are probably the last thing to get done, which usually take a little bit more time than the actual project because they're usually the last ones in, and they have to come in and do the wiring, and the biggest end of it is the programming and then working all the bugs out of it.
So let me ask you, because I didn't get a chance to at the beginning of that project, like we said, you jumped in the middle. You're feeling comfortable and good with the company we're using for the junior high, since it's the same company.
Yes.
You're feeling good about that project based off of this project?
Yeah, working with PSI on this new project. I've been working with them with regards to design and scheduling. I've asked for several prints to review before we get started. We will be having several meetings to keep them on track, because we only have 7 weeks to get this done. And I like to have 90% of it, 95% of it done before we open up.
Thank you, and I do know it's quite difficult to jump in the middle, so I appreciate you answering the question too.
Thank you.
I do have one question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
For the
I was ready to run.
we like to wait for you to try to run, and then so for the MJHS, the HVAC replacement project, the equipment purchases, and the signage, are you anticipating any sort of supply chain issues, or do we look pretty good on anything that
with
we need?
regards to the HVAC equipment, that's already been pre-purchased because of the timeline, because it takes like 20 to 23 weeks, and they've already done that already. With the sign, I'm not sure. I have to get with the vendors. I'm sure with, like Dr. Mount had mentioned, materials now are hard to get, and it depends if it's coming out of the country or not. The sign, I'm not sure about. I have to work with the vendors on that and see where they're at with it. The other HVAC stuff, I think, they've already stepped up and they've already pre-ordered all that stuff.
The sign, at least for us, is an aesthetic improvement where there's not as much of a deadline that it has to be done by a certain day. HVAC, we need done by the time the kids and teachers come back.
Yeah, we do. Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'll just give a quick little update. So coming to a couple board meetings near you, action items. Replacing staff laptops at Walnut Trails and Minooka Primary Center. This will be most likely come to your next board meeting. That'll be a 4-year lease to own kind of model that we've done in the past. So we're currently evaluating the models. Moving over to E-Rate Land, where we have a wireless infrastructure project coming for the junior high, intermediate, and Minooka Primary Center. This is replacing all the wireless access points in the rooms and hallways that provide wireless internet to all of our devices. What's nice about this project is this would be eligible for 50% reimbursement. So we're currently in the midst of E-Rate Land proposals and waiting for bids to come in to then bring you guys an action item, hopefully next month or at the latest, the March meeting.
And just to recap real quick, E-rate is a specific federal revenue that comes in solely for technology projects, and we can either get like a discount on some telecom services or use it to have like reimbursement on tech capital purchases. So,
Hey, getting back to laptops, how many laptops about?
Roughly 100, give or take.
And then any value to the old laptops? Can we use
So,
them or sell them?
so what we will likely do is take the older laptops and then give them to the different teacher aides, substitutes, circle around through the other buildings and things that we cycle through. But yeah, so we'll use the best that we can and then look at disposing and possibly selling off the older ones. But most of the time, we find people to use them through other means. Then next up, as you guys just mentioned, the Minooka Elementary School's big kind of HVAC project is coming to completion. So every year we've been targeting one building to kind of run new wiring backbone. So the elementary school would be a good school to go after this summer. Again, this one will also be eligible for reimbursement. So we're going to add wiring to all the classrooms. And so we're the same process as before, just waiting for bids and the E-rate rules to see who we can recommend. One other kind of highlight project is like Walnut Trails, their gym and cafeteria audio system is basically broken or barely functioning. So we'd like to kind of go after that over the summer. We bring in, an audio company to install speakers, microphones, and be able to also tie this into the intercom system. So like right now, if you were to make a page intercom system into the cafeteria of Walnut Trails, you're likely not going to hear it just because of like the roar of the students in there. There's only one small speaker. We need to tie that into like the ceiling speaker infrastructure, and that's not as possible at Walnut Trails with the current equipment. So this would get used for, of course, like playing movies in the cafeteria, but also in gym class, having a sound system that's not on a cart, something more kind of professional and built in, but then also hooks into safety equipment and functionality. And that kind of dovetails into a couple other projects we're looking into is kind of like this communication and safety integration. I've been talking to other districts, and there's Minooka 201's ready, I think, to kind of increase our communication and safety plans and functionality. And there's a lot of different ways to go after this, and that's why I don't have any kind of estimate of a cost yet. For example, some districts will purchase a smartphone app that teachers and staff use. So let's say in the case of a fire drill, you run outside, and if you're a teacher, you bring your phone, and you can mark your students as present or accounted for or not found. So then all the other teachers know to look for, say, Adam, because he's not with his third hour teacher. The other side of the coin is a heavy investment into a new phone system that when you make like an all-call announcement, it also calls the police and lights go off, or having kind of pull stations, or in this case, like a push station where you pull it, kind of like a fire alarm, but more for the police. And you make a pull station. So we're going to be looking at just like all different types of solutions, and eventually, hopefully, recommend something that really kind of fits to Minooka 201. Again, talking to other districts, everyone kind of finds what works for their building. There isn't really like Coal City bought this, let's go get that. It's more of a, let's look at all the different types of solutions and problems and solutions, and then find something perhaps that would benefit us from a safety and communication perspective.
So the lockdown push, would that go in every classroom? Would it be just
So
in?
no, that it basically in major kind of intersection halls and major thoroughfares, if you will, throughout the buildings. That's one potential solution that's out there. There's other schools that buy arguably like those life alert badges that the teachers wear, that you press 2 buttons and then it calls the police. I mean, it's kind of like the Wild West of potential solutions. That's why we're starting to look at, firstly, like a smartphone app solution with principals and Mr. Lustig to kind of look at both from a school functionality perspective and security, and just evaluate all types of options and hopefully see if we find something that collectively we think would really benefit 201 staff and student safety and communication. And then lastly, the interactive flat panels that are coming out now, like this is not a touch screen, this is a normal TV, but over the next 6 to 18 months, really start looking at more of these. So as we look at the younger classrooms, as we go to replace a projector instead of buying a new projector, I think the direction would be to move towards like a giant interactive touchscreen monitor that we kind of bolt on the wall or just put on a cart depending on various circumstances. So, but with that, I mean, these are not, you know, they're pretty expensive, so we'd want to really nail down with curriculum, instruction, just nail down the best plan and really tie everything together. This isn't one of those things where you buy and like, here you go, good luck. You'd really want to spend a lot of time developing the training model so teachers maximize, get the most out of it. They are costly, but over the next 6 to 18 months, I think we'll be bringing to you guys more information and possibly recommendations for them. That's all I have for this portion of tonight.
I just want to say, this format, even back from building and grounds to technology, it's extremely easy to understand and see. I don't know if I've seen this format before, but I like it.
Other questions for our operations team? If Aaron takes 2 steps, somebody has to ask him a question. That's the way we've been going tonight. So, all right, thank you all very much. Nice job. So moving into action items, our first action is the adoption of the new grading scale for grades 3 through 8 for the 2023-2024 academic school year and beyond. Dr. Chesrek.
Hello. Last month I came to you after our education committee meeting and I reported out that at the meeting we had a discussion about the current grading scale. We also talked about and looked at common practices in our neighboring local districts and what they utilize for a grading scale. Aaron, do I have the clicker? Could you click me? Thank you. As a reminder, this is the information that we looked at. All of the surrounding districts and the grading scale that they use is the 10-point scale. Highlighted is Minooka High School. Our feeder district also uses this 10-point grading scale. So we had a good discussion. Some of the points brought up were that, you know, typically parents will voice concerns about the current scale, that it is the high expectations, that students are feeling anxiety and stress in order to meet that level, in order to have, for example, an A in a class, that they're working extremely hard and they're not finding success, or that they're just missing by a matter of less than a point, and they're having their emotional well-being is a concern. So those concerns come up, I would say, regularly. The last time that we formally discussed the grading scale was back in 2016. So the Education Committee had a discussion, and the outcome of that was a unanimous vote that the current grading scale, as recommended to the board for further discussion, it was to change to the 10-point scale. So that was the recommendation from the Education Committee. It was unanimous. I brought that to you last month for further discussion, and so now it is up for action to make the change for next year for the school year in grades 3 through 8. Does anyone have any questions?
Round up. So if somebody's at 89.9, do you?
I think that
I believe most teachers do do round up.
I was
Yes.
just kidding.
That's just great that that was the question that you had.
I just want to echo what you said. This concern has been brought to me regularly over the last 3.5 years or so. So can you give us an idea how many people were involved in this committee roughly, or this discussion?
Sure. We had about 23 people. It was a representation of parents, teachers, administrators, and Mr. Shainberg as a board member was there.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. I need a motion to approve the new grading scale for grades 3 to 8 for the 2023-2024 academic school year, changing the grading scale as presented.
I so move. Second motion.
Mr. Sartorius?
Aye.
Mr. Blount?
Aye.
Mr. Cronin? Mr. Schoenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Skorzynski?
Aye.
Ms. Voss?
Aye.
Mrs. Conquest?
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheserek, and thanks to the Ed Committee for the robust discussion and quick work. Next up for action is the copier fleet lease agreement. I believe Mr. Souza is coming back to the podium.
Welcome to Technology Procurement kind of season, or episode 1. So tonight we want to talk about the copier fleets. Our copier machines district-wide are somewhere between 5 and 6 years old. So tonight we'd like to ask for your permission to procure new copy machines for the summer. They'd be installed in the summer. We did a RFP. We got multiple bids out from many vendors, and ultimately the technology team feels comfortable in recommending that we kind of continue or renew essentially our agreement with Image Tech, which supplies Konica Minolta hardware, and they provide all the servicing and fixing. And the lease would technically go through Wells Fargo Public Finance. That's who would actually be cutting the monthly lease check to. A couple highlights or improvements from this agreement to our current agreement is we have decreased one of our copiers through kind of a cost or printing analysis or print usage analysis. At MPC, we decided collectively to kind of remove one of the copy machines there to kind of save the district quite a bunch of money. And every building essentially, for example, at the K4s, instead of having 2 high-speed copy machines and then one alternative slower one, now we'll have 3 kind of higher speed machines. So the K4s and the other buildings will get a slight increase there in just functionality and or speed. And one of the other benefits here is a lot of these vendors, including Image Tech, originally propose years 1 and 2 cost, and then years 3, 4, and 5, they put in a little asterisk of expect maybe a 4 or 5% cost of living adjustment surcharge for the servicing going forward. We were able to kind of get a locked-in rate for 5 years, so that's what really kind of helped drove the cost even down further, and I believe kind of like helps lead towards recommending Image Tech. With that, as far as what do we do with the copy machines at the end of the day, the old ones are basically, we've kind of ran their usefulness. A lot of these vendors, honestly, it's very hard to find a copy machine after 5 years or 5 years plus of heavy usage to then actually spend a bunch of money to kind of refit and try to sell off. So in this case, Image Tech is just going to haul them away and dispose and recycle them properly. For us to try to get involved with some type of sell-off thing while ripping them apart to take hard drives out is just really not, there's really no benefit there than having to deal with even transporting big copy machines that are 400 pounds. So really it's just kind of like take it with you, sayonara kind of a thing with some of these copy machines. What's nice about this is we will own the new ones coming in, because one of the things we kind of lucked out with Image Tech in our current lease is we have machines falling on and off the lease cycle at various times as we entered into various agreements. So this would put everything on a July 1 to June 30th kind of 5-year plan. So then again, 4.5 years from now, when we're looking at this again, we'll have a lot more kind of flexibility and weight, if you will, to further shop around too. Image Tech has been pretty good to us, so we're willing to kind of go forward with them. Any questions about copy machines?
Have we used Image Tech now? Or?
We currently use them,
Okay.
yes.
Other questions? Any further requests for walk-up songs from Mr. Souza?
If there's no other questions, I need a motion to approve the copier fleet lease agreement for 2023 to 2028 as presented.
Also move.
I'll second it.
Ms. Voss?
Aye.
Mr. Skorzynski?
Aye.
Mr. Blount?
Aye.
Mr. Cronin?
Aye.
Mr. Sartorius?
Aye.
Mr. Schoenberg?
Aye.
Mrs. Conquest?
Aye, motion carries.
And with like so many shows on TV, the first night gives you 2 episodes of these cliffhangers for Mr. Souza. So we get one more student device per, yeah, exactly.
Yes. So next up, this one's actually even the easier one, if you like those commercials about the easiest decision. So the student device procurement recommendation here, basically it's our Chromebooks for 2nd and 5th grade, the cases, and roughly 70 iPads to kind of just improve the oldest 70 iPads we have in the current K1 fleet. Why this is an exciting opportunity here is luckily Mary Robinson is just really great at her job, so all of this is getting paid for out of the digital equity grant. So like I said, just a very easy kind of decision. As far as the actual Chromebook model themselves, the tech team is happy with our current, the Asus Chromebook we bought last year. It's basically the same model, just with a little bit more memory, but we're happy with the ruggedness of the 2nd and 5th grade model currently, and just all around performance. It's already a lot better than the current 6th or 7th grade student Chromebook. As all things technology gets better as you buy newer, but just wanted to highlight that we're excited to do this and just kind of put us in a good place forward. So we're again ordering this, recommending we procure it now so we can place orders. So whether it takes 2 months or 4 months, it won't really impact our own kind of summer timelines and schedules. As far as the deployment, generally it's the first day of school. We like to have all these devices in the first hour classroom of each student. And the old devices, we have a myriad of things to do with them based on the condition, honestly. We'll have an 8th grade graduate. If you want to buy the Chromebook for, say, $50, you can kind of take it with you. But we use a lot of machines to kind of rotate out our loaner pool, if you will, and classroom spare computers, and then we try to harvest a lot of parts that we can. And if there's parts that are interchangeable, we like trackpads and other things, we try to harvest them out of the not so good looking machines or underperforming ones, so then we can build a supply shelf inventory, if you will, for as much as we can. So we try to do everything we can to kind of maximize all these investments, and then ultimately we'll end up having just like a recycle to take these things away sometime in summer.
Yeah, quick question. I know enrollment's been a topic. How did you come up with the quantity? How did you come up with the 980?
Yes. So enrollment's always kind of a, everyone here kind of knows it's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. We looked at last year's kind of enrollment, how many intakes we have, and we kind of estimate current numbers, obviously, with, say, 20. We start with current numbers of K1 or K4 for the Chromebook purchase. We add about 20 because we expect just naturally to add at least 20 per grade level, and then we add a little bit more for ideally, if let's say a student comes in at the end of in May, we'll just give them that same 5th grade Chromebook model that he would have gotten if he would have started 6 months ago. Honestly, it is the best guess, but getting them now, even if we have a little on the shelf, we're getting more and more enrollment. It seems like we're starting to kind of tick up, especially mid-year move-ins are going higher than the mid-year move-outs that we've seen. And I know a couple elementary teachers are probably nodding their heads at number of kids that just rolled in the past 3 weeks. But at the end of the day, it's an educated guess. Without a surplus, but not a mountain of surplus.
Are you finding the cases that we've been utilizing to be effective in preventing breakage? Obviously, they have to use them.
Yeah. So that's one of the things we're changing out for 5th grade this upcoming year is an actual more of a snap-on case. Because we believe the briefcase style that we currently have, I mean, they are protective, but when the kids get to junior high, a lot of them start taking the cases off because it's maybe too bulky or whatever reasoning. So we're switching over to a more of a clamp-on plastic shelf case where we hope then it'll be less enticing to remove and then hopefully further protect the machines kind of long-term. Any
other questions for Aaron? Okay, I need a motion to approve the procurement of student computer devices for an estimated cost of $365,650 as presented.
So move. And I'll second that, Mr. Sartorius.
Mr. Sartorius?
Aye.
Mr. Skorzinski?
Aye.
Mr. Blount?
Aye.
Mr. Cronin?
Aye.
Mr. Shaneberg?
Aye.
Ms. Foss?
Aye.
Mrs. Conquest?
Aye, motion carries.
I just have one question. Is that grant money going to be available again next year, you think?
I don't know. I don't know if Mary has any.
Yeah, we weren't expecting it this year. It was we were having the conversation
Following up on that, like this allowed us to actually purchase these devices outright. We had been going on a lease model where we were leasing devices to basically get 4 or 5 years of use out of them and then cycle them through and do a new lease. So if they didn't renew this grant, it wouldn't be like a $370,000 purchase next year. It would be like an $80,000 lease for 5 years. So we'd stretch that cost out. But this grant is just wonderfully timed to allow us to purchase these outright and avoid the financing costs.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Souza. Next up in our discussion information, I asked our school security team if they'd be willing to come and meet the board tonight. This is one of the just the best improvements that we've added to our schools. You know, along with instructional coaches this year, we've really added some key pieces to our school system. So I asked lead school security officer Scott Lustig, welcome Scott, if you haven't met the board yet, and for him to bring the available members of his team to just introduce themselves to the board and then just share some insights about like how the initial rollout has gone and what the day-to-day looks like for them. So Mr. Lustig, welcome.
Thank you. Scott Lustig, 31 years of law enforcement experience, recently retired from Bolingbrook PD. Did a year with the Yorkville School District doing the same program. Very proud of this program. We're very excited. We're enjoying ourselves with the students and the staff, teaching them safety, teaching them about run, hide, fight, and just basically being their protection. We like to use the term we're there for the students and staff and not because of the students and staff. So I'd like to introduce part of my team. I've got Todd Miller. And Todd comes from Hodgkins Police Department. And then we have David Graham. And Dave was with the Illinois State Police. We are missing tonight Larry the Legend. Larry Collins came to us from Joliet Police Department. He is currently on a ski trip, much to my chagrin. We're also in the process of hiring our last individual. And then also part of our team is Kedra Meese. She's an officer, a uniformed officer, school resource officer with the Minooka Police Department. And she is primarily at the junior high. Currently, we've already started training, working with the students and staff with the Run, Hide, Fight. During Teacher Institute days is when we typically work with the staff to get them up to speed, and then we'll be rolling into working with the students as the year goes on. We've also been working on evaluations of the buildings, just making sure that the proper doors are being open for open and dismissal, but then making sure that the other doors are all secure. Establishing relationships with the police and the fire jurisdictions. I've met with all the chiefs from police and fire, and we've got a great working relationship. They've offered up some training for us, so we've been able to go. Last Friday, we attended as a team, we attended a seminar on the Sandy Hook tragedy. So just looking forward to moving on with this team and working with your students and staff.
Yeah, so any questions for Mr. Lustig, any members of his team?
I have a question regarding the training. Is any of that available training include like CIT training? That's something the departments are undergoing right now?
Yes, so all of our officers have CIT certification through their police departments before they retired, and we would definitely like to keep that rolling.
What's CIT?
Crisis intervention, so it's a lot of de-escalation as opposed to any kind of hands-on or anything like that.
You mentioned you guys just attended the Sandy Hook tragedy training. With you all being former police officers, so this was like your second time around, or?
Yes, all of us have been certified in ALICE instruction as well as Run, Hide, Fight. We've been to countless seminars and speakings of all the tragedies that have happened in the country. But recently we did go to this seminar, and the first half of the seminar was very powerful. It was a mother of a survivor, and she spoke on it, and it was very moving.
Thank you.
Are you going to be involved in the evaluation of those intruder alert devices in the buildings
Yes, sir.
with the technology group?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Mr. Souza and I are going to be meeting with a lot of the vendors and figuring out what suits our district the best, what we can get the most out of each program.
What's really good and what's not just frivolous? Isn't that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
You said you did evaluations of our facilities, and what, did you find anything that we have a real problem with? Did you make any changes?
The only changes I made was a couple of doors. Couple of the buildings I felt were still moving off of the COVID days, and they had more doors open for dismissal and opening. And so we asked that they close a couple of those doors and just limit it to less doors, and makes it easier for the team to position ourselves to be a little bit more safe. So that was the only changes. Everything else has been going really good.
Thank you.
So yeah, I just wanted to say, I know I've heard a lot about the interactions with the students in the schools and the hopping from school to school and the daily interactions. But I don't think we could go too far without, there is a piece to the job you all volunteered for here that we know what that piece is, right? And to keep the students safe if it needs to be done in a situation. I think everybody deserves a really big thank you for putting yourself forward and helping our schools be as safe as possible.
Thank you so much. We're very proud of that. We know that we have a specific mission in mind, but the great thing out of this whole program is these guys get to spend time with the kids and develop those relationships and that trust, and we're just having a ball doing it. So.
Can you describe how the staffing is being organized, to cover the buildings, how you're kind of managing where people are located in that coverage?
Sure. We're currently doing a rotation. So myself and Officer Meese predominantly stay at campus. So I'll be at the intermediate and she'll be at the junior high. And then the gentleman that I introduced, they'll be rotating weekly. So they'll be spending an entire week in a particular building, and then they'll rotate to another building. It's mainly to gain that familiarity with the building for the team, but then it's also for the students and staff to get to know the whole team.
Yeah, and on Wednesdays he even flips too, to
Yes.
where they'll get
Yes,
over to MIS and Mr. Lustig gets out to the other buildings. So
Yes, I pull myself out and let them be me for a little while.
So the understanding then is that each person will know each building and each group of staff in the event that they need to respond to something or support a building.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's one of the main reasons with staffing. In fact, like right now, we have somebody on vacation, so to be able to rotate into another building so that everybody gets a chance to see these guys and get to experience them.
More question?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
spoke to the interaction with the staff and the students, and from what I've heard, it's been extremely positive, and so very happy to hear that. Can you just share a little bit about how you're introducing yourselves to the students, for example, and the difference in like campus versus elementary?
Sure. Believe it or not, campus versus elementary is no different. We're all pretty much doing it the same way. We spend a lot of time in the lunchroom, sitting at the lunch tables with all the kids and hanging out with them, and they seem to love that. The guys also will throw the football around at recess, play hopscotch, race, all that kind of stuff. Recess is a big deal, and then also reading. That's one little difference with the elementary is a lot of the guys will jump in to some of the classrooms and read to the littles.
Thank you so much for updating us on this. I would love to come and see some of this in the buildings. I think there's quite a few of us that would, so look forward to doing that at some point. But thank you so much for kind of taking this on and making sure we're set and going.
Thank you.
And just to summarize, again, we'd like to thank the board for investing in this type of program. It's been so incredibly well received by the staff. Parent feedback has been positive. We have not gotten any negative parent feedback whatsoever. And seeing these gentlemen interact with the students and just seeing the way that they even embrace having this type of position, it has just been a great addition to our school system. So thank you for your support in this.
Thank you.
Next up would be any board topics that you would like to discuss.
Does anybody have any topics? I just want to mention a reminder of our community engagement opportunity tomorrow at MIS at 6:30, correct? For anybody in the community, the 201 community that wants to come be a part of that focus time to help us with the creation of the Portrait of a Graduate, which will help us with our strategic planning and decision making moving forward.
All right, on to administrative reports. Ms. Robinson, do you have anything else? Mr. Wysong, anything else? Mr. Souza, anything else? Thumbs up. Dr. Cheserek, anything else? This is going very fast. Ms. Massey, they previewed that you had some data for the board, so.
Hello, everyone. To answer your question about personnel, I feel like it's like the 12 days of Christmas when we talk about the personnel report, because we have one of these and two of these, and it's fluid and moves around. In a nutshell, right now we have about 14 positions that aren't filled. But an example of that would be just the other day we had a resignation from a nurse. So we were fully staffed in our nursing department, and then life happened, someone's gonna leave us, and now we have a posting for a nurse position. So there is a huge ebb and flow that comes with some of these positions. We have currently a couple of aides, program assistants, that we still need to fill. Again, if I go back to a couple months ago when we talked, I think we were looking at like 30 positions that weren't filled, so we've got it down now to about 14. We have one of our gentlemen for our school security officers. We're looking to make a recommendation the next board meeting to fill that position, so that one will be coming off the board. We have a lunchroom monitor, like I mentioned, the nurse, a health aide, transportation. We're looking for a dispatcher still, and have been scouring through everywhere we can think of to find a dispatcher. Looking at a couple of custodians, 3 custodians for evening crew, and 2 cooks and a permanent sub. We're always advertising for folks that will sub for us, whether it be for custodial work, in our kitchens, doing anything. We'll take any subs and welcome that. And we are working, Mrs. Robinson and Ms. Wilson are working on putting out some blasts to our families like we did earlier in the year. We just talked about that this morning. Really looking to harvest some of that power, maybe bring some people in from the community that might want to work for us, even if it's in a capacity of not being full-time. And it works. What's nice about it is it's flexible with their schedules. So they can take a shift when they want one. It could be a day shift. It could be a night shift, whatever works for them and their family. So like I said, in a nutshell, about 14 right now. If you talk to me next week, we'll have a different number for you, and it'll be a different selection. But our principals have been doing a really good job all year, being vigilant. They understand how important it is for our students to have a full staff, because ultimately those folks serve a purpose in the building of supporting the students in some capacity or another. So they've been doing a really great job of pounding the pavements. We've been casting that net out there and trying to draw people in as well. So we're down to about 14.
Good with the drivers?
Yeah, that's the one thing I was going to say. That number didn't include drivers because we will always take more drivers. So it's not a defined number that we're only looking for 3 more right now.
But working since we've come back from Christmas break even, Ms. Haas has reported to us, we had one person basically come off the street and already had their CDL, and we high-fived them and put them on a bus that afternoon. We've had a couple people that have been, not that, we went through the background checks.
We did do background checks and everything too, folks. Like, we just did a security presentation. So.
We get that excited. We had a couple of folks studying for the test that passed the test, and we're going then to do the, the actual driving test. So she's doing a really great job of trying to hustle people through that program, making sure that they're prepared, supported along the way as well, but really trying to fill some spots. But like Dr. Mon said, we'll always take a driver, because even when we have a full boat of drivers, somebody takes a day off, you still need to plug somebody in to fill that position. So
what about, at the beginning of the school year, we were talking about the pastor, did we get any drivers or candidates from?
No, sir. Nothing, despite their efforts and support to the school district, nothing really came in that capacity. But
yeah, I mean,
we appreciated their efforts.
We didn't receive any, no one came to us and said, I'm here
directly
based on that message they put out. But we're so grateful that they did
Absolutely.
that. And anyone else out in the community, speaking to the camera now, please put out there that we do need drivers and we still need aides and all of that. So.
Yep.
And are we offering ways for incoming bus drivers to work while they're waiting for that time, or to try to encourage? I can imagine with that length of time between applying and actually getting your CDL is a long time to not be working.
Yeah, a lot of folks will come in and they'll aid for us. So they'll be an aid and gain some experience of just being on the bus and seeing the nuances of, how do you open your bus for your trip, and then how do you close the bus down. And then while they're doing that, they're also receiving the training in-house from Kathy Haas and her crew over there that prepare folks for that. So we've seen that be a nice little pathway to get folks to the driver's seat.
Do we have enough bus drivers because I know there's another concern for like the sports activities, all that. I mean, we're good for now?
For now. Kathy does a nice job of making, it's like a giant puzzle, right? And she figures out who she can shift and who's available, who runs a longer route but can't do that but could do this. Like, it's a full-on ballet over there. But they, in fact, have done a very nice job all year. Like I said, we were able to pick up a couple drivers over break. So that always, offers a little reprieve to some of those folks that have been picking up some extra shifts, and allows her to really just utilize people, not over capacity, but in a normal fashion.
Yeah, and Mrs. McCarroll was giving us a thumbs up from the back too, that our extracurriculars are getting covered.
Yeah.
Another thing about the bus driver shortage, though, is sometimes we have to use high school drivers to do our own extracurricular trips because we need every one of our drivers doing the regular route. So sometimes our employees are missing out on that extra type of work. So continuing to get ourselves fully staffed and overstaffed in transportation would really add to the culture there. So. Yep. I was in a meeting with a group of area superintendents, and there's districts around us that have 80 open, 80 paraprofessional positions open. So the work that Ms. Massey, Dr. Staub, the principals have done in getting paraprofessionals into our system is applaudable, because there are districts that are reeling much worse than we are in this regard. Other questions for Ms. Massey? Dr. Staub.
I just wanted to highlight, I know that Mr. Wysong went over what they've done over at the South Garage or the South Shed, but their team has done a phenomenal job of cleaning up that shed. And Ms. Robinson, her office and my office, we're doing a big file cleanup and finding files that are old that we don't need to keep as part of a records destroy that was approved previously, earlier this year. I can't remember the exact time, but Mr. Wysong's crew has been pivotal in getting all of those files cleaned up for us and having that space cleaned up. So I want to thank him and his crew, because the work that they have done in that shed is just absolutely outstanding. When Ms. Robinson and I were there last week, we were completely shocked by how much they've cleaned up in the last couple of months. So thank you again for that. I also wanted to highlight a lot of the professional development that we have going on in our district this spring. Between our administrative teams, our instructional coaches, some of our teaching staff as well, we have everything from college courses, workshops that we'll be offering. We actually are starting a college cohort with the University of St. Francis, where the teachers that complete that will come out with an ESL, or an English as a second language endorsement, which again is going to help our students. We've had a huge increase in the multilingual population in our district, as you can see in what Ms. Martinez has added to the student services report this month, we continue to see an increase in those numbers. So having more teachers that have that endorsement is going to just continue to benefit our district overall. In addition to that, our classes that we're offering with the USF Partnership Center around student engagement, working with students with diverse backgrounds, including poverty and multilingual needs, and then restorative practices. And I know that Ms. McCarroll put some information into my report about the committees that she's been working on. So if you guys do have any questions, she's here and available tonight. And then in addition to that, our instructional coaches with Dr. Cheserek are leading book studies. They're doing data discussions and talking about data across the district. So really, we've just have such a robust amount of and diverse amount of offerings for our staff, and every time that I speak with people from the University of St. Francis, they're just in awe how much our district does for the teachers compared to other districts that they work with. So again, that goes out to our staff at the buildings, our administrators, and some of our teacher leaders that just continue to put themselves out there to continue to lead. So thank you again to all of them. And that's all I have, unless you guys had any questions.
The newcomer data that's under the multilingual caseload, is that newcomers during the school year or?
Yes.
Since the start of the school year?
Yeah, just to review, a newcomer is somebody that is new, not just to our district, but new to the country. And depending on their language proficiency, they can be a newcomer for 3 to 6 years. And the average is about 5 years when they're considered a newcomer. That is new to our district just this year. So we've had a large increase in that number as well. And a newcomer or a language 1 proficiency student is somebody who is speaking mainly a different language than English. And our newcomers are coming with various different language backgrounds. So we're really working hard to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of those students, and not only in the classroom, but Ms. Martinez and her team, and then I've been working with Ms. Wilson. We're doing more things to support the families. Several of them are coming here to our area, and they're not really equipped for winters. So we're doing some clothing drives with our staff within the district to have winter clothes on hand for parents to come if they need winter boots, winter coats, hats, gloves, any of that. So our staff are going to start doing our clothing drives even within the buildings to help support the families. And Ms. Martinez has been pointing them in the direction of community supports for the families as well. So yes, we are definitely seeing an increase in that number.
Along those lines, do you foresee any technology, devices or any equipment that we may need to take a look at to help support? For example, in one of the aid committee meetings, we talked about even parent-teacher conferences and being able to communicate back and forth. And I know at work, sometimes we have headsets for people where they're able to do that. So, any sort of equipment or anything that you foresee that we may need?
So we've been purchasing, and again, Mr. Souza has been phenomenal at assisting us with this. We utilize Google Translate, which is actually, I think we found that to be the most proficient, in either on an iPad app has been an easy way to utilize that. We also have translating headsets. So the students will use those, the teachers will utilize those, and then we've also utilized those, yes, for parent-teacher conferences. Our multilingual staff has stepped in and also been assisting. Ms. Martinez helps if there's any need for translation when it comes to their residency documents and their getting all of the registration information into the schools. So yes, we most definitely have been exploring technology. And I believe the Google Translate has been our best option, correct, Mr. Souza?
Yeah, we've had some success with Google Translate. One of the things we're also investigating is a parent were to leave a voicemail in a different language that, that
And are we using like some of the translation apps on the phones that may make some of that back and forth a little easier? Are some of the teachers or staff trained in how to use that?
I believe that the Google Translate has been the main one there, Aaron. For asking those questions, because yeah, that's another, I mean, Mr. Souza and Ms. Martinez have been meeting, I think, weekly, and they'll come up with a new way, a new problem for us to solve and help support these families better, so thank you.
It has been wonderful to see Ms. Martinez work within the community of our multilingual families, because those events have such a massive turnout of parents and community members excited for what's being offered for their students and their families. So thank you for that. I think that's an incredibly important service that we're offering our students and families.
I would agree. She's been phenomenal in bringing those to us, and we're excited to, I believe we'll be hosting like a school fair for not just our multilingual families, for all families, but it'll be focused for multilingual needs in the spring.
I do have another question regarding the nursing updates, and I see here that our nursing team will be undergoing Narcan training. Yes. And so following that, how will that information be communicated to families, and will you have to get an additional release, you know, just in case, or how would that work with Narcan? Is it something similar with like EpiPens? I mean, it's an emergency situation.
Exactly.
So how
yes.
do we work through that?
So that would be, that's just like the emergency for EpiPen administration. So they would be housed within the buildings. In order for that to be housed, the nurses would need to go through training for that. I am not positive on the parent communication and how we communicate that to parents, that we would have Narcan in the buildings, but we'll definitely look into that.
Thank you, Dr. Staub. I don't have much to report tonight. First, I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Wysong and Mr. Winterbottom. Right after the holiday break started and we had that massive winter storm, as the board knows, I believe we had pipes burst on Christmas, I think is what we found. So those gentlemen actually drove out the evening of Christmas and were mopping up water and getting buildings back. So that's time you can't get back, and we thank you for your work there. Looking ahead to the month of February, the board knows we'll be back in strategic goal number 4, which is connecting with our community. So we're hopeful that the Portrait of a Graduate report can come before the board at that time. If not, it'll be the March meeting. So we'll be talking about community engagement again next month. But along with that, as you can tell, we just started the third quarter of our academic year, but here at district office, we're already well into planning for the next school year. So we talked about enrollment projections and what we thought enrollment was looking like a few months ago. Now we just did financial projections and looked at the big capital projects. And February is always when we kind of bring a preliminary look at staffing. So we'll be working with the schools to go over what their enrollments look like. We'll be working with the various departments to see how our current staffing model is working and where we can, possibly look to improve or modify. So that would be one of the primary discussion pieces that I would expect for us to bring you in February. That is all I have to report this evening. We do have a closed session to discuss the performance of specific employees. Happy to take any questions as well.
Any questions? All right, I need a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing a specific employee.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing a specific employee.
I'll second it.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
No action is expected after closed session. So thank you for coming, everyone.